Ma'am, that mop bucket doesn't go in the boardroom. The voice cut through the morning air like a blade, cold, sharp, and entirely devoid of humanity. Imani Brooks stood there, one hand still on the mop handle, neon lights reflecting off the polished vinyl floor beneath her feet. Her faded work jacket clung to her frame, rubber gloves stained and worn, her face strangely calm. No one knew that the woman standing in the middle of the boardroom owned the majority of Brookstone Freight Solutions. And absolutely no one suspected that today would mark the beginning of a reckoning. Common one if that opening gave you chills and made you unable to look away. Brookstone Freight's headquarters sat in Midtown Atlanta, a gleaming glass high-rise outfitted with luxury furnishings and a rigid access control system. Upstairs, ice-cold offices buzzed with executive decisions, while downstairs was another world entirely. The place where drivers signed delivery contracts, janitors worked overnight shifts, and people forgot that real human beings still moved through those halls. Brookstone had once been a family-run company, born in a garage and raised on the sweat of laborers. But now, it stood as a symbol of division. Between the leadership seated at walnut tables imported from Seattle, and the ones who took out the trash after every meeting. Imani Brooks, 48, deep brown skin, a balanced build, and tightly braided black hair neatly pinned back. They called her Miss Imani, like her real name didn't matter. She was the cleaner, the floor mopper, the one pushing a cart full of chemicals every morning at 5:30 a.m. No one knew that 25 years ago, back in 2000, she had co-founded the company with her husband. After his passing, the remaining co-founder took over. Nathan Cole quietly pushed her out of every document, every email, every decision. She didn't sue, didn't protest. She simply kept it all. And one day she applied for a janitor position. No one recognized her. No one asked why someone like her showed up without an interview. People had grown used to looking through her. Imani walked past meetings where executives discussed slashing driver pay, not caring who overheard. She emptied trash bins while CEO Trevor Hale chatted with his deputy about cutting healthcare benefits. Each time she made a note, a black notebook tucked behind a box of gloves in her locker, marking the date, time, subject, who said what, and who was present. Once, while wiping the conference room glass, a junior staffer muttered as he passed, "Bet they just fake clean to stretch their hours." She didn't react, just smiled faintly. But that day, her smile wasn't the same. For 15 years, Imani moved through each floor like a shadow. She knew which printer jammed the most, who used company funds for basketball tickets, and who once called the janitorial crew trash. She wasn't just mopping floors. She was observing, recording, connecting. In silence, she rebuilt the company's true portrait. Who profited, who got crushed, who still cared enough to make change, and who needed to be removed. At the center of that web stood Trevor Hale, the man running the company as if it were a family inheritance. But he forgot it was Imani's signature that first graced the business registration papers in 2000. That morning, a paper plate holding half a slice of birthday cake sat alone in the third-floor hallway. No table, no napkin, just a drying slice of chocolate cake and a faint stain on the carpet. Imani bent down to pick it up, gloves still on. "Miss Imani, you missed a spot." Trevor stood behind her, hands in his pockets, flashing a smug, knowing smile. "Right there, we've got a client pitch. Mind doing your job." She rose, slowly. Didn't argue, didn't show anger. She simply said, "I'll make sure it's spotless." Trevor clapped once. "That's what I like to hear." That night, with most lights off, Imani didn't go home. She used a keycard she'd found, carelessly dropped by a negligent manager, to access the financial records room. She didn't take anything, just took pictures. Payroll files, bonus reports, proof of benefit cuts. While Trevor awarded himself a $55,000 0 cents bonus for exceptional executive performance. She sent everything to her attorney, along with a single message: "I'm ready." The next morning, Imani wasn't in a janitor's uniform. She walked into the lobby wearing a navy blazer, fresh heels, and eyes sharp enough to cut through the thickest glass. She said nothing, no mop in hand. She headed straight for the elevator to the 8th floor, where the boardroom was waiting. And this time, the woman walking in wasn't the cleaner. She was the owner. "Put your name on the company," Imani whispered, the warm kitchen light casting a glow over her steady expression. It was the year 2000. The couple sat together, paperwork scattered across their small dining table, sweat mixing with the ink from a hastily written business plan on the back of a grocery receipt. Roland looked up. "You sure?" Imani didn't blink. "I trust you, and I know what I'm doing." That one line, born from love, strategy, and belief, gave birth to an empire. And 15 years later, it would become the legal key that brought her back to the very place where they tried to erase her. Comment 1 if you feel like this flashback isn't just a memory, it's a declaration of war. Planned from day one. Brookstone Freight didn't begin in a corporate tower. It began in a cramped kitchen in Columbus, Georgia. Back in 2000, it wasn't even a company yet, just an idea Roland jotted down after a long day unloading his uncle's truck. He had ambition, the kind forged from sweat and southern highways. Imani was different. She was the mind behind the curtain, a quiet woman who didn't need to be center stage as long as things ran the way they should. They had a broken fax machine, 2 flip phones, and just enough money to cover rent. But they had each other, and that was enough to start everything. Nathan Cole was never part of the original dream. He was Roland's childhood friend, slick talker, sharp dresser, but never one to get his hands dirty. When the company grew faster than expected, Roland brought Nathan in to handle client expansion. Imani hesitated, but she stayed silent. She knew men like Nathan, shiny on the outside, hollow within. After a car accident in 2004 claimed Roland's life, Nathan revealed his true colors. At the funeral, his speech was cold, formulaic, barely mentioning Imani. 3 weeks later, he filed legal paperwork, quietly removed Roland's name from the company, and cut all contact with Imani. He thought she'd vanish. He didn't know, she kept everything. Nathan mistook silence for surrender. But Imani had it all: the original contracts, transfer papers, financial records, even a notarized letter from Roland granting her 50% ownership after his death. She could have taken it all to court, but she didn't. Because she understood something Nathan never would. Power, without the right timing, is just noise. She let him expand the company, hire a new CEO, bring in investors. She watched every logo change, every edited line on the company's website. They'd buried Roland. Then they tried to erase her. But she never left. She was waiting. In 2010, a small job ad appeared on a community board near Montgomery. Night shift janitor. No experience required, no background check. Imani circled the listing in red ink. 2 days later, she walked into Brookstone Freight with a fake resume, a borrowed address, and a new pair of shoes. No makeup, not her real name. She was hired on the spot. No one recognized her. Nathan never showed up at the main office. The new management, young, rushed, blind, never looked twice at her. And just like that, she returned. Not as a founder, but as a shadow within the system. In the internal records, Brookstone once listed, founded by Roland Brooks and Nathan Cole. Then later, only Nathan Cole. Then, no one at all. Imani watched her own face vanish from the founder's tribute wall, her name deleted from the timeline on the company website, replaced by campaigns celebrating the success of pioneering male leadership. She didn't react. Because sometimes the fastest way to expose a lie is to let them write it themselves. She wiped down boardrooms, passed by events, and saw the empty chair marked Roland in utter silence. No bitterness. Only time. Inside her locker was always a sealed envelope labeled "Open when ready." Inside, everything. Original contracts, transfer papers, violation logs, audio recordings, internal emails, falsified payroll records, even photos of confidential meetings. For 15 years, she tracked the slow rot of company culture. Not once did she resist. Not once did she complain. But each document was a sharpened edge to a blade. She didn't need an army. Just one moment. The morning after the chocolate cake incident from Chapter 1, Imani opened her drawer and pulled out the envelope. She stared at it for a long time. 15 years in a building that pretended she never existed. 15 years of lies repeated until even the liars believed them. But today, they would have to say her name. And it wouldn't be Miss Imani the cleaner. It would be Imani Brooks, the co-founder, the rightful owner, the woman who came back. She slid the envelope into her coat pocket and stepped into the light. It was close to midnight. The hallway on the 6th floor was silent, lit only by a thin strip of light spilling from the boardroom at the end. Imani parked her cart quietly by the wall. Inside, laughter echoed. Trevor Hale, the current CEO, was chatting with several senior executives. She looked me straight in the eye and said the pay was too low. Trevor laughed. I told her, straight up, don't like it, leave. I've got 20 resumes lined up outside. Laughter erupted. Meredith Chandler, the VP, added with a smirk. They should be grateful we even let them in this building. More laughter. And Imani, standing just outside the door, was still treated as if she didn't exist. Comment 1. If this moment made your blood boil with injustice. Brookstone's headquarters was once a symbol of trust and hard work. Now it stood like a cold statue, built on the backs of others. The hallways gleamed nightly, but the soul of the place had dulled. Managers behind glass walls earning 6 figures, not knowing the name of the person working their floor. Trevor Hale, young, polished, obsessed with performance metrics, had never set foot in the warehouse. Meredith Chandler, head of HR, had never personally met a contract worker. Together, they'd built a so-called company culture out of glossy slides and hollow slogans. While they celebrated report numbers, Imani sat quietly in the staff break room, writing down everything they tried to forget. Trevor Hale was the poster child of the modern CEO, quick-talking, smirking, always quoting buzzwords like optimize efficiency and lean growth strategy. To Trevor, workers were numbers, KPIs, and janitors? Invisible on every org chart. Meredith Chandler, his trusted aide, looked kind, but she was the one who drafted policy cuts to break hours and denied emergency leave requests. Both believed themselves untouchable. They had no idea the woman pushing the mop bucket was listening to every word. They didn't know, back when she was still co-founder, Imani had sat in on the hiring panel for Brookstone's very first CEO, long before Trevor even knew what Brookstone was. When you wear a janitor uniform and rubber gloves, people say things in front of you as if you don't exist. Imani had heard it all. Who got fired for speaking up? Who cooked the books? Who used the company card to book fancy dinners for their girlfriend? Worse still, they didn't even bother whispering. Once, as Trevor passed by her, he sneered. I swear, these cleaners just fake it to drag out their hours. No one defended her. Not a single glance of protest. Imani said nothing. She simply added a line to her notebook. Trevor. Discriminator. 10:17 p.m., 4th floor hallway, witnesses. Unnecessary. Imani's locker had a hidden compartment. Behind a bag of gloves sat a black leather-bound notebook. No name, no label, just pages of handwritten truth. The entries began in 2010. The year she returned to this building under a false name, as a nameless night janitor. Inside, everything. Feb 14. Cut bonuses for low-tier staff. None of them will dare speak up. None rise. Room 5, 8, and 8. June 3, slip and fall incident in the warehouse. No incident report filed. Brenda witnessed. Aug 19. Let the cleaning lady handle it. That's her job. Trevor. Imani wasn't collecting out of bitterness. She was collecting for the truth. And the truth, if you're patient enough, reveals itself. Late at night, Imani stood near the boardroom, where light spilled like a tear in the dark. She heard the clinking of glasses. Then Trevor. If he thinks the pay's too low, tell him to go deliver Uber Eats. I've got a stack of applications in my inbox. Laughter erupted. Meredith added, half the people here should be grateful we still keep them around. That laughter hit like a slap to every worker giving their all each day. Imani didn't move. She wasn't outraged. She was certain. Certain that this company was no longer the Brookstone she helped build. Imani turned her cart and stepped into the elevator unnoticed. She went down to the first floor, into the break room, sat down, opened her notebook, added another page. Not a page of rage. A page of conclusion. Cannot be fixed with memos, must be uprooted. She had filled 72 pages, but tonight she knew the final page would be the start of real action. Before leaving the building that night, she paused in front of a security camera and looked directly into it. No one knew what that look meant. But after that night, it would haunt everyone who had ever ignored her. The following week, the office lights still glowed as usual. Trevor still sat smugly behind his meeting table. Meredith still ordered her coffee using her nickname. No one knew that a 72-page report had already been handed to Attorney Miles, waiting patiently at a small diner just 10 minutes away. They thought they were winning. They had no idea they were living inside the most silent investigation ever launched. By the very woman who once helped build it all, it was just a paper plate. On it sat a half-eaten slice of birthday cake, frosting melting into a sticky ring around the plastic edge, and a plastic fork stabbed dead center, like someone had left it there as a dare. Not on a table, not next to a trash can. Just right there in the middle of the third-floor hallway, right where she had just finished cleaning. Imani bent down, glove still on. The chocolate had already begun to stain the carpet. At the end of the hallway, a voice rang out. You missed a spot. Trevor Hale stood there, hands in his pockets, wearing a crooked smirk. Smug. Casual. Poisonous. Comment 1. If you felt that slice of cake was the ultimate act of disrespect. The third floor was the presentation zone, where VIP clients were given tours, where every carpet was expected to be spotless, where plants were replaced weekly, and janitors were told to stay out of sight during visits. Imani knew this place better than anyone. She had scrubbed every inch of the hardwood, knew exactly which light flickered and where dust tended to settle. That afternoon, she had spent over an hour making the hallway pristine for a partner showcase. And right there, in the cleanest place, was where they dropped their clearest insult. Not by accident, but on purpose. That morning, before her shift began, Imani walked into the break room and saw Cynthia collapsed on the floor, face buried in her hands. Cynthia Monroe, 33, a single mother who worked night shifts at Brookstone. Always on time, always took extra hours, never once complained. But today, she cried. Her son, Malik, had been in a car accident, on his way to school. He was rushed to the hospital unconscious. Cynthia asked for 1 day off, just one. Her request was denied. Too short-staffed, cleaning schedule must stay on track, HR replied coldly. No one called to check on her. No manager followed up. She was just a number on the roster. Cynthia didn't know, but that tear on the break room floor was the spark that ended Imani's silence. Imani said nothing. She didn't pat her on the back or offer empty comfort. She simply sat beside Cynthia, listened to her sob through breathless grief. And something changed in Imani's eyes. No more patience. No more quiet notes. This was a decision. Because it wasn't just Cynthia's story. It was the story of every person dismissed under the excuse, the system doesn't allow it. That cake in the hallway was just the final catalyst. The rage now had a name, and it was ready to act. That night, after her shift ended, Imani didn't go home. She stood outside in the parking lot, the wind slicing through her uniform. She pulled out her phone. One contact, Miles' final. One way. You sure about this? Came the voice of Elliot Miles, her lawyer, the man she'd been quietly feeding documents to for months. I'm sure, Imani said firmly. No more waiting. All right, but this won't be quiet. Imani looked up at the building, the one she and Roland had once dreamed of. Now, it stood as a monument to betrayal. I've cleaned worse, she said. Let's begin. Within 48 hours, Imani and her attorney filed a request for an emergency shareholder meeting, using her legal rights under the original 1998 ownership agreement. Attached were the documents she had spent 15 years collecting. Budget fraud reports, these from Trevor approving benefit cuts, audio recordings of racist remarks, lists of unlawfully terminated employees. This wasn't an allegation. It was evidence. Trevor and Meredith had no idea. They were still busy planning the Q4 party-themed inspired leadership, unaware that the real inspiration had been in the building the entire time. The next day, Imani showed up for work like usual. No one noticed the change in her outfit, the way her hair was perfectly pinned, or how she moved like someone who no longer needed permission to exist. She wasn't here to clean. No mop. No broom. She walked straight past reception, pressed the elevator for the 8th floor, where the board of directors was meeting. As the doors closed, her eyes met the security camera. No longer the eyes of someone overlooked. Now, the eyes of someone ready to rewrite every rule. While Trevor spoke about HR reform on the 8th floor, Elliot Miles entered the room first. Excuse me, I have an announcement. This is Mrs. Imani Brooks, founding shareholder, now exercising her right to convene this meeting under Clause 4 of the original agreement. The room froze. Trevor smirked, still clueless. And when Imani walked in, no one called her Miss Imani anymore. Only silence remained. And the truth began to reclaim its place. No mop in sight. No avoiding glances. Just a folder and a silence heavier than any word ever spoken inside Brookstone. Excuse me, this is an internal meeting area, someone said sharply. Imani stepped into the boardroom on the 8th floor, her navy blazer standing out against a sea of silver suits and branded ties. She carried no mop. She walked calmly, eyes locked on the man seated at the head of the table, Trevor Hale. I didn't come here to clean, she said, her voice steady, like stating a simple fact. Then the door opened again. Elliot Miles, the attorney, entered, a thick folder in hand. Comment 1 if you think this boardroom entrance deserves its own Oscar scene. Brookstone Freight's main boardroom was a stage for power. Polished wood walls, a chandelier overhead, a 5-meter-long conference table surrounded by imported leather chairs. Every quarter, this was the site where decisions were made, about salaries, terminations, and HR reforms no one downstairs ever got an explanation for. Trevor often bragged the table cost over $14,000, real wood from Seattle. He always sat at the head like a modern-day king. But this morning, an empty seat at the far end finally had someone walking toward it, and no one in the room was ready for it. Elliot Miles didn't talk much, a seasoned attorney with dark brown skin, wearing a tailored charcoal suit and carrying a thick black folder. Good morning, he began. I'm legal counsel to Mrs. Imani Brooks, co-founder and majority shareholder of Brookstone Freight Solutions. Trevor frowned. Meredith, the VP, rolled her eyes. Some board members exchanged worried glances. Elliot placed the folder on the table and began opening it, page by page. The original 1998 agreement. The asset transfer following Roland Brooks's death. The shareholding records that were never sold or surrendered. Each document sliced into the arrogance floating in that room like a scalpel. Trevor jumped up. What is this? Some kind of joke? I've never seen her name in any files I was handed. Imani stood still, her gaze slicing through every pretense. You once called me a janitor, she said, voice low but firm. But I'm the one who signed the founding documents for this company. I built the foundation, while you were still figuring out college in Florida. Meredith chimed in, There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Elliot interrupted. Every document has been legally verified. Today's meeting has been convened under majority shareholder rights. No one said a word. Only the hum of the ceiling fan kept spinning, like even it was waiting for the reckoning. Imani opened a second folder. This is the falsified financial report. Bonus padding for the CEO. Health benefits slashed for employees. Page after page slid across the table to Trevor. His eyes darted, his face flushed. This is the transcript. Meredith ordering HR to deny emergency leave to an employee whose child was in an accident. This is the email you sent to accounting. Cut all secondary benefits. They won't dare push back. She looked up. And lastly, this is a list of unlawfully terminated employees, punished for speaking up. Elliot added, under Article 7, we call for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current CEO. Trevor snapped, you can't do this. You don't have the right. Imani stepped to the end of the table, locking eyes with him. You thought I was just the janitor, she said. I hold 51% of the company's legal shares. I stayed silent for 15 years to see what you'd turn this company into. She turned to the board. I didn't come here for a title. I've been silent long enough. I don't need applause. I came to reset the order. Elliot slid an envelope to each board member. Immediate termination notice. Trevor Hale. Security is waiting outside, he said. Trevor froze, looked around the room. No one met his eyes. No one stood up. Meredith quietly gathered her papers, pretending she had an urgent meeting. The door opened. 2 security guards stepped in, saying nothing. Trevor grabbed his phone and stormed out, dragging every ounce of his exposed arrogance with him. When he was gone, Imani sat down at the end of the table. She didn't lean back. She didn't smile. She simply opened her notebook and flipped to the next blank page. Rebuild begins. A young board member, Jonas, barely 30, hesitantly raised his hand. So, where do we begin? Imani looked him dead in the eyes. We begin by listening to the ones who've been silenced the longest. She didn't need the whole room to believe, just one person to ask the right first question. And that was enough. No standing ovation, no grand speech, just stunned faces and slowly turning into respect. And for the first time in years, a black woman sat at that boardroom table. No permission needed, no credentials to prove. Only the truth. Imani had just finished her meeting with the board when a message popped up. The staff break room is packed. No flags, no cameras. Just real people. Drivers, warehouse workers, night shift guards, and Cynthia, the woman who once cried after being denied time off to see her injured son. Imani walked in. No microphone, no slideshow. A driver, Alonzo, raised his hand. So, do we get our overtime pay back now? Imani looked around the room. Every face here had once been overlooked by the system. She nodded. Yes, and retroactive compensation for the past 2 quarters. Comment 1. If you've ever dreamed of a leader like that walking into your workplace, there were no leather chairs today, no chandelier, no espresso brewed in an Italian machine. Just folding chairs, plastic tables, a slow ceiling fan, and real people, the ones who were never invited to meetings. The old system hadn't disappeared, it had simply stepped back far enough for the forgotten to begin speaking up. Imani sat at the front, not at a podium, not raised above anyone. The company calendar still hung on the wall, Brookstone Freight's logo fading in the corner. But today, things were different. This was no longer a company ruled by arrogance. It was becoming a place where those once deemed not qualified were now called by their names. Alonzo, the veteran driver, thick hands, fingernails cracked from years of lifting freight. He'd once lost overtime pay for forgetting to clock out. Knew Deborah, the low-tier HR assistant. Every year she was told to hold off on raises to help the company through tough times. Cynthia, the janitor who once cried in silence when denied leave to visit her hospitalized son. They were all here, Imani called each of them by name. Not from a payroll list, not from a roster. She remembered their faces. She remembered their words. From when she wore a janitor's uniform and they assumed she didn't understand. The mood wasn't warm right away. Some crossed their arms. Others exchanged wary glances, unsure if this was real or just another stunt. They didn't want hope, because hope had burned them before. They'd seen new leadership come and vanish too many times. An older woman stood up. "You say you're here for us, but where were you all these years?" Imani didn't flinch. "Was with you, cleaning up trash, scrubbing carpet, dumping mop buckets. I heard it all." She paused. "And I waited for the moment when they couldn't deny the truth any longer." No applause, just eyes beginning to soften. Imani laid out the new plan, not with a slideshow, but with printed handouts placed before each person. Full overtime pay plus retroactive compensation for 2 quarters. Healthcare benefits reinstated with staff voting on provider options. Anonymous surveys delivered directly to the majority shareholder, Imani. Deborah whispered, "Are we really allowed to speak freely?" Imani smiled. "I lived in silence long enough. Now it's your turn to speak loud." One nod, then another. Then the whole room began to believe. Justice may never be perfect, but dignity can be restored. A warehouse worker raised his hand. "They fired me once for asking about pay discrepancies. Do I get to come back?" Imani nodded. "I can't promise full reinstatement, but if you were terminated for telling the truth, we'll reach out. If we can't give your job back, we'll return your dignity." The room went still, but then from the back. "So, you really founded this place?" Imani replied without hesitation. "I always did. I just waited for the day you would know it too." The meeting ended without clapping, but each person left the room with a different look in their eyes. Deborah carried her survey. Alonzo shook Imani's hand, without saying a word but holding firmly. Cynthia left a small note. "I used to think someone like me could never sit where you are. Thanks for proving me wrong." Imani folded the note and tucked it into her inner pocket. She didn't want applause. She just wanted to make sure no one like Cynthia ever had to cry alone in a break room again. Next Monday, Imani parked in the executive lot. She didn't like it. It was too far from the back entrance, where the real workers came in. But today she chose to walk through the front doors, for a reason. A message, loud and clear. "I'm no longer hiding from power. I'm using it." At the elevator, a new hire looked at her nervously. Good morning, Mrs. Jenkins." Imani smiled softly. "Oh, Imani." As the elevator doors closed, she didn't look in the mirror. She didn't need to. She knew exactly who she was, and why she was rebuilding this system from the inside out. For the first time in 15 years, those front doors didn't open just to let her in. They opened to finally welcome back everyone who had once been pushed out. Imani sat in her new office, the same room that once belonged to Trevor Hale. The same glass door, the famous carpet, the same window overlooking Midtown Atlanta. A young intern walked in, holding a stack of files, and nervously sat across from her. "Sorry if this sounds out of place, but why did you wait so long to speak up?" Imani didn't smile, didn't dodge the question. She looked the young woman in the eye and said, "Because power only matters when you know exactly when to use it." Comment 1, if you've ever asked yourself, when will I rise like Imani? The CEO's office was no longer a throne of arrogant command, and had become the moral engine room of a company in rebuild. The door was never locked, because Imani believed true power never needs to be kept under lock and key. The walls bore no portraits of former CEOs or plaques of hollow achievements. Instead, a whiteboard handwritten with one question: who needs to be heard today? Imani rarely sat in the leather swivel chair. She spent her days on the warehouse floor, in the break room, at lunch with employees. She wasn't playing the role of a boss. She was rebuilding a culture. Even after Trevor's removal, not all executives welcomed the shift. Some department heads whispered behind closed doors. One questioned Imani's qualifications. Another wondered if she had the capacity to lead growth. Imani heard everything. In a strategy meeting, an old CFO leaned forward and asked, "Do you even know how to scale a national distribution system?" Imani looked straight at him. "I scaled silence into survival for 15 years. I think I can manage your spreadsheets." The room fell quiet. No one tried her twice. A week later, Nathan Cole, the co-founder who once betrayed Imani, sent an email requesting a discussion about his future role in the new strategy. Imani didn't reply right away. She invited him to a private meeting. No documents, no lawyers. He arrived, tie straight, smile practiced. "We could see this as a chance to collaborate again," he offered. Imani nodded slightly, then placed on the table a letter Roland had handwritten in 1999. His promise for this company, for their family, for trust. "You betrayed this," she said quietly. "Not just me, but the only person who ever truly believed in you." Nathan didn't speak. For the first time, he looked ashamed. Imani began rebuilding, starting small. Monthly listening days. One-on-one visits with every department to ask, "What makes you not want to come to work?" Anonymous surveys on benefits, time off, and workplace respect sent directly to her desk. No apps, no press releases. Just eyes, ears, and presence. One day, Imani walked into the break room and saw Cynthia writing on the shift board. "What are you doing?" Imani asked. "I'm swapping shifts with Alonzo. It's his son's birthday today." Imani smiled, said nothing. The new system was already working. Rebuilt by those who had once been forgotten. During a company-wide open session, someone asked, "Some people still say she was just a janitor. What do you say to that?" Imani stood under a spotlight, in a packed room, no microphone in hand. She answered slowly. "I held the broom, I carried the mop bucket. I scrubbed the dirt they refused to see. But I also signed the very first page of this company's business plan. I kept the values this place forgot." She looked around the room. She didn't want applause. She only wanted people to stop calling her lucky and start calling her by her name. "And if anyone asks who I am," she said, "tell them I'm the one they never saw coming." No fireworks, no fancy banquet. Imani hosted a quiet gathering in the company's back lot, where drivers usually ate lunch. There was a food truck, folding chairs, soda cans clinking. Alonzo raised his can. "For the quiet ones." Imani clinked hers back. "And for the ones no one ever expected." Cynthia left a folded note on the table. "I used to think someone like me could never stand where you stand. Thank you for proving me wrong." Imani folded the paper and tucked it into her coat pocket. That was her treasure. A month later, the company's homepage was updated. No more CEO handshakes. No more corporate taglines. Just one simple line. Listen, respect, rebuild from what was forgotten. Below it, a photo of Imani standing with staff. Not in the center. Not the tallest. Not the brightest. But the one everyone looked toward. Because now they knew. Sometimes, the woman who once held the mop was the one who built the entire house. This isn't just a story about a black woman once dismissed for holding a mop. It's a reminder, job titles don't define a person, and an office chair doesn't determine true worth. Imani didn't shout. She didn't retaliate with noise. She rose, one step at a time. With dignity, intellect dismissed for years, and a self-worth that never wavered. To those who've been kept from the tables they deserve to sit at, because of how they talk, how they look, or how simple their shoes may seem, this story is for you. To every young person of color, especially women, who've been told they're not ready, who've stayed silent for fear of being labeled disruptive. who've swallowed their hurt just to get through another shift. You are not invisible. You are not alone. And you don't need anyone's permission to be here. To leaders asking, what does diversity mean beyond the brochures? Here's your answer. Respect doesn't begin with policy. It begins the moment you choose to truly listen to those your system has long ignored, and to those who love a twist soft enough to be real, deep enough to cut. Remember this image. A Black woman with neatly braided hair, calm eyes, quietly swept a rotten system clean and rebuilt it with the very hands the world once called unworthy. No shouting, no superpowers, just enough pain, and the courage to turn that pain into purpose.